So the title of this video in English is Slowly Losing My Will to Go Forward. And while a bit dramatic, it is in Latin for a reason. Which is just that over the past few days, the past few weeks particularly, but even over months, going back till probably about summer, I found that Latin just became increasingly more frustrating. And this is because as I've moved out of the kind of easier or even intermediate lessons and I've got to harder stuff, like actually reading authentic texts or even just readers, the higher I go, the more frustrating it gets, the harder it gets, the longer it takes to learn everything. Basically just, again, the more frustrating it gets. There's really 4 reasons for this in terms of, again, the stage that I'm at now, which is just reading full text, whether it be readers or just authentic stuff. Which is that, number 1, and I've talked about this before, the etymology of Latin is really difficult because unlike in English where you have very clear rules, there are rules but they're a lot more looser. They're kind of like guidelines to how things are generally constructed. But from author to author, work to work, and in some cases even sentence to sentence and paragraph to paragraph, the etymology of each sentence will be radically different. So you'll have verbs sometimes at the end of the sentence, sometimes at the beginning, sometimes in the middle. You'll have adjectives come before the noun, after the noun. Sometimes the adjectives will be several words removed, like one that I saw today, which was removed from its word by 2 verbs that were couched in between it. So in terms of reading it, it isn't always obvious how these things line up, where again, in English, it's simply a problem with seeing the word order. You can tell how a certain verb relates to a certain noun, or an adjective relates to a noun as well, by the word order. But in Latin, because again you can put verbs, nouns, adverbs, adjectives, whatever you want, even if the adjective is removed by several words from the noun which it relates to. So you could have a noun near the end of the sentence and an adjective near the beginning of the sentence, and the adjective is supposed to relate to the noun but it's removed from it, or vice versa. You could have the adjective coming after it a few words where the noun comes before it a few words. It's because of the endings of the words, which brings us into grammar. In terms of verbs, I'm not good at writing or conjugating verbs myself, but generally if I'm reading I can pick it up intuitively. Even in terms of subjunctives and passives, which I consider more difficult, I can get them. But in terms of nouns, particularly the ablative case, you have the fact that it means several things. It can mean from, with, by. Then you also have the fact that, not in all words, but in many words, the ablative is the same as the dative in terms of the word ending. Then in words like puella, for example, the ablative and the nominative are the same. So if I'm reading the word puella, girl, I don't know if that's in the ablative or the nominative, and even if it is an ablative, it can mean, again, several things. Or if you're looking at, for example, Dias, the ablative is also the same as the dative, so you can't really piece them together. And normally, in a lot of sentences, you can tell from context, but again, when the words are kind of jumbled around, they're in different places from sentence to sentence. And then you have the fact that the grammar, the word endings, which are supposed to be the context in Latin, you tell where things go by the word endings, whether it's English, you tell where things go by where they are placed in a sentence, are sometimes very hard to tell because, again, they can have several different meanings. The ablative can be the same as the dative, the nominative can be the same as the ablative. The dative and the generative are also exactly identical in many words. So in terms of figuring out which is which, if it was to be constructed in such a way that it was in English, 99% of the times, even if the endings are identical, you'll be able to tell from context, because again, they're very different, they're jumbled about, it's hard to tell. Then you have the third reason that makes it difficult, which is that this is also true in English, but especially in Latin. A single word can have several different meanings, sometimes 2, 3, 4, as many 6 or 7, or even more in some cases. It can have several different meanings, and sometimes these meanings are conflicting, sometimes are contradictory. So a word can have different meanings that are completely contradictory. It's the same word, but it's, again, completely opposite meanings. And you have to tell by context which is which. And sometimes when you learn a word, especially when it has, again, 4, 5 different meanings or more, which are all different from each other, you might only learn 1 or 2 of those meanings. So when you see that word in a sentence and you're reading it, it'll make no sense. You understand the word, you understand where it's located in the sentence, you understand its conjugation, but it just doesn't make any sense. So you have to look up the word and learn yet another meaning for it. And then of course there's the words that you simply don't know. Even if these make up 10% or even just literally 5% of the words in a sentence, a single word in a sentence, even if that sentence is, say, 11 words, and you've got one word you don't know, can completely wreck the sentence. It can make it basically incomprehensible. You can maybe understand some of the words around it, but if it's something important like a verb or an important noun, you'll be lost. In terms of dealing with these things one by one, they can be dealt with, but when you're going into reading Latin, more often than not you're dealing with, if not all of them, most of them. So you're looking at, say, a few paragraphs, maybe not every sentence, but there's lots of different placings of the word. The words are all fumbled about. Again, sometimes the verb comes before, sometimes after, sometimes the adjective is connected to it, so it's right next to it, sometimes it's removed from it by a few words. Then you have the endings. You don't know if this one's an ablative or a nominative, a dative or a genitive. In the context it would tell you that in terms of where the words are placed in the sentence, what the words are. You don't quite know. Then there's maybe some words throughout the paragraphs that you do know, you 100% have them, but you don't know the meaning for it, or if you do know all the meanings for the word, you aren't quite sure which meaning applies to this word in this context, in this scenario. And then of course you have the words that you simply don't know. And this is possible to get around. So for example, when I'm reading easier stuff like, say, the Vulgate, which I can read almost fluently, specifically because, and again I've talked about this in previous videos, the grammar is made to be very, very easy, which is to say it's consistent. It isn't like some other text where it's sometimes it's here, sometimes it's there. It's consistent all throughout the book. So like in English, there is like a set of rules. The rules are different obviously from English, but it almost always stays consistent. It doesn't use complicated grammatical structures like other works might. And there are a few other, not many, works that are like that, but the vast majority of Latin, even readers, in terms of 99%, well not 99%, but 90-95%, they can range from verging slightly to just completely being all over the place, just being incomprehensible. If you actually look at the translations, if you translate each word you don't know, each word you know but you don't know the specific meaning of it, you can understand it post hoc, after the fact. But it's frustrating to look at a single sentence and to have to translate the word you don't know, the word you do know but you don't know the meaning of, and then put it through Google Translate as a whole to then understand it. Because again, after you've done that, you can read the sentence in Latin, and if you do that with a few sentences, say you've got 7 sentences in a paragraph, 3 of those sentences you can read without any help, you just understand them automatically. But there are sentences range from you can mostly understand it, you can get the gist of it, to maybe one or two where, again, because of the way the words are fumbled, or because of the fact that you don't know two words in the sentence, you have to translate them. So you're sitting there for like 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes trying to translate this paragraph with 7 sentences. And again, once you've done it, you can read it fluently, you can understand the whole paragraph, you kind of look at it and go, oh, so that was an ablative, oh, so this was such and such. You maybe get a bit frustrated by replacing some of the words, but you understand it. But as you can imagine, the whole process of it, and again, it really depends. There's some works where it's just hell when every single sentence is a nightmare to get through. Then there's some works that are simpler, that are easier, that use more common words, like the Vulgate, where I can just pick it up, move to almost any page and just read through it, sentence by sentence, and maybe within a single paragraph there's like 2 words I don't know. Whether it's in some things, it's every single sentence there's 2 words that I don't know. So again, it really depends, and I'm kind of using 2 extreme examples, but even in terms of the things that are in between, or you might know a few more sentences, you might know a few more words, it really gets to a point where it's just frustrating going from sentence to sentence. You feel like you're making no progress, because while you may understand those individual sentences, when you're looking at the work as a whole, it's just a completely fresh new page. So even if you get several paragraphs done, you get them translated, you can read them perfectly, the very next sentence is a complete new story. It's something you have to work over all again, and there is progress. Even if I just look back at the past 2 months, past 3 months, I can reflect on how, in terms of my reading, my general comprehension has got better, the number of words, just the sheer vocabulary, has got higher. But again, the process is very slow. It's just, for as much progress you make, and it's kind of relieving as that is, again, it's just, you can learn so many thousands of words, but there's always so many thousands more you need to learn. You can get through so many sentences, but there seems like there's an infinite load ahead of you. So no matter how far you progress and how far you can look back at the past 3 months, the past 6 months, the past year, since you started it, you can really reflect on how, if you looked at this a year ago, or a little more, you wouldn't have got a single word in a sentence, you wouldn't have understood it at all. But now you can actually read it, and it's not perfect. There's some things you slip up on, there's some things you have to translate, but you can get the general gist of most of it if you read through it. But that's really not the thing you look at when you're in the moment and you're focused on that sentence, that paragraph. You're not focused on the sense of achievement, the sense of, while I'm looking at this thing and say it has 400 words, and I understand 380 words out of that 400, you know, I understand 90% of the words in this authentic sentence, or 95% of the